Did you know about
Okay. Well, now you can see me, but I can't see you. I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome to all of his friends, his colleagues, his confidants. We all worked with him in one way or another. We all loved him in every way that you could. I was with him on his, my name is Marilyn Chris. I'm an actress friend of his, and I worked with him a great deal from the early 60s on through maybe 3 months ago. At 89, he was still working on another project. He was always working on another project. He loved the projects, he loved the theaters, he loved the theater people, including the audience, and we miss him beyond belief. At his 89th birthday, we were talking mostly about how wonderful this 89th birthday was, but what are we going to do for the 90th? He was getting ready to stage that, and he didn't get a chance to stage it. So this will be his almost 90th birthday, and this will be a celebration of his life, because his life was really, really extraordinary. I met him in the early 60s, and we were both young and full of piss and vinegar, and we were going to conquer the theater, and he was going to be the director, and I was going to be the actor. And we did plays, all kinds of plays in churches and little theaters and firehouses, wherever we could. And then we did a project. He did not start the project, and I certainly did not start the project. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We were in a project together. He was the director, and I was one of the actors, and it turned south. It really turned sour, and he left it. I couldn't leave it. I left it a little later in the run. It stunk, but they were unkind to him, and I think what that unkindness did freed him to plant the seeds to have his own theater, where he could direct what he wanted to direct, whether it was American or European or Israeli or political or racially or whatever it was, because he was bursting with ideas. And I think this play that went south, which shall remain nameless, planted the seeds for him to start a theater where he could do what he needed to do. And he and his partner, George Barry, and his friend, George Morfogan, and 2 other fellows from Yale, started the Chelsea Theatre Center, named because it was in the Chelsea area. And he started doing the plays that he wanted to do. And he did them. We did them first at a church at 28th and 9th, where he was kicked out because I don't remember what it was. We were too racially integrated or not racially integrated enough, or we were too Jewish or not Jewish enough. I don't know, whatever reason. He was always one step ahead of everybody else. And then we did plays all over until finally he was at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where I'm sure a lot of people worked there with him, picked up on him then as he began to be a force in the New York theater, which indeed he was a force in the New York theater. And at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, he did Yentl, he did Candide, he did a 5.5-hour production of Jean Genet's The Screens, directed by Nikos Volanakis. And I think you got a part in the play, which I think was 57 characters, if you could pronounce Nikos Volanakis. I knew one phrase in classical Greek, which is stithos marmaro ki kardia hiesmieni. I will not tell you what it is here in a synagogue, but I'll tell you privately if you like. And I think that's why I got the job. but there were 53 or 57 of us, and I was the deputy. And you cannot know what went on, because Minos had even bigger ideas than Robert. And he had Delphi, her name was a Greek actress, and used to say, Mikos, you want faster? You want slower? You want lower? You want? And they communicated in their way, and then Robert would come in and help the ones that didn't speak classical Greek. In any event, a lot of plays were done. A lot of plays, a lot of important plays, mostly great ones, some good, some whatever, but he always welcomed all of us, whether we were actors, writers, other directors, craftspeople, designers, set designers, sound designers, costume designers. He loved the theater, he lived the theater. And I am so sorry that he died the theater, because he was not supposed to die. No. He was not supposed to die. He was indefatigable. He had energy, make all of us look like paupers. And he was supposed to be here to call us at midnight, or for us to call him at midnight and ask him about a food, or a lobster, or a swim, or a something. And he's not here. And it's not fair, but we are here to honor him. And indeed, he is worth extraordinary honor. Mwah! To him. Mwah! I would like to introduce a musical interlude with the incredible Anthony Evans, the gorgeous and incredible Tina Fabry. And before we do that, Tina would like to say a few words, because she is so fond of him, as indeed we all were. And I hope there will be time for whoever wants to speak that's not on the program. But we've got to get out of here. Even though some of us are Jewish, even though they want the goyim, we have to be out by 3. So please, Tina, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'd like to start out by saying that I met Bob Kalfin as he directed the production of Queenie Pie in 1989, a musical that was written by Duke Ellington, but he didn't complete it. So you have to just imagine how many people wanted that job of completing it for him and get the credit. In that room, there were people who were conducting, people who were actors, people who were musicians, who all wanted to put in their 2 cents. And you know, I'll tell you, Bob Kalfin knew how to make all of those 2 cents add up to something. He had everybody loving everybody before the end of every rehearsal. He got people to listen to each other and put on a production that was magnificent, Queenie Pie. And also, at the end of Queenie Pie is when I got the job singing with the Ellington Orchestra. Thank you. I loved him dearly. And we were always, and we see each other, it was always, oh, it's so good to see you. And I did a couple of readings. One, he actually had me say a prayer in Hebrew. I was scared to death, but I did it. He was a wonderful, wonderful spirit that put people together all the time. We'd like to dedicate this song to him. For all the times when you stood by me, for all the truth that you made me see, for all the joy you brought to my life, for all the wrong that you made right, for every dream you made come true, for all the love I found in you, I'll be forever thankful, baby. You're the one who held me up and never let me fall. You're the one who saw me through it all. You were my strength when I was weak. You were my voice when I couldn't speak. You were my eyes when I couldn't see. made me fly. You touched my hand, I could touch the sky. I lost my faith, you gave it back to me. You said no star was out of reach. You stood by me and I stood tall. I had your love, I had it all. I'm grateful for each day you gave me. Maybe I don't know that much, but I know this much is true. I was blessed because I was loved by you. You were my strength when I was weak. You were my voice when I couldn't speak. You were my eyes when I couldn't see. You saw the best there was in me. You lifted me up when I couldn't reach. You gave me faith 'cause you believed. I'm everything I am because you love me. You were always there for me, the tender wind that carried me, a light in the dark, shining your light into my life. You've been my inspiration. Through the lies you were the truth. My world is a better place because of you. You were my strength when I was weak. You were my voice when I couldn't speak. You were my eyes when I couldn't see. You saw the best there was in me. Lifted me up when I couldn't reach. You gave me faith 'cause you believed. I'm everything I am because you love me.
That was very lovely. Thank you so much. And Anthony Evans didn't want to speak because he speaks through his music, which Robert just adored. So now we go on, and I would like to introduce to you, please, Miss Roseanne Kirk, who was a friend, a confidant, a colleague, mostly a friend with Robert, and with whom I have now become very good friends, courtesy of Robert. So, does somebody know how to do this? Somebody know how to take it up? Well, that theater training was courtesy. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Robert and I were friends for at least 30 years. And our friendship began when I was his agent. And in the last 10 or 12 years, we talked every night. Usually between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. In our late night conversations, I would also usually confide my problems and frustrations as a new producer, and he would tell me about the projects that he was working on and what he hoped to achieve. We talked about every subject under the sun. He was thinking about the stuff that I was doing in Europe. He was just as interested in my stuff as he was in Hamlet or Amadeus or Shana Madel. We also had long conversations about spirituality and how important it was to hold on to hope. Bob always believed in the possibility. And he was always open to a new approach or a new point of view. In his final moments, he was working on a project about a man who had a very negative life experience. And then the man discovered the aurora borealis. He enthusiastically called me at midnight to tell me all about it. Well, how will it end? How will you leave them, the audience, I asked. I will leave them with the power of change and the discovery of beauty. We need them to take that with us, especially now, he said excitedly. There's an expression I've heard, that, so-and-so is an old soul. But Bob Kalfin was never an old soul. He was a kid in the candy store. He was young no matter his age. He was like Peter Pan. And I knew that I'm a better person because I knew.
And I noticed that Robert Moss has come, and if he will come up on the stage, just get him to speak later on. But please join us. I see that you came later. All right, then I'll call on you when it's your turn. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, now I would like to introduce a lovely gentleman that I've just had the pleasure of meeting, who was a friend and colleague of Robert's, Mr. Ted Snowden. With you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ted Snowden. I am a codependent producer, and still, occasionally, but that's been my role in life almost since around the time I met Bob. Let me go back even before that, since I love going back to the past. Let's head back about 49 years, November 1973. I had just moved to New York, fresh out of graduate school. Abe Beam was elected mayor that month. I think that's the month that a truck fell through the elevated West Side Highway over here, somewhere below 56th Street. Some might remember that. Changed that part of the city forever. And actually, I met that time another Bob, another legend and pioneer in our field who I see is here, Robert Moss. Bob Moss, nice to see you, Bob. He actually did a reading that month of a play I had written while I was in the Army and in graduate school. And so I moved to New York and thought, I'll be part of the scene. But the big news that November, the very biggest news, when the hottest ticket in town was at a small, cramped space over at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where Bob Kalfin and his Chelsea Theater Center and Harold Prince had done the impossible. They made a big hit out of that problem child, Candide, and everybody wanted to get in. All of us had loved the score forever, but nobody knew sort of how to make it work. I don't recall how I got 2 tickets for such a major event. I think I probably wrote for them well in advance before I even moved here. But I was there, it was a revelation. And as we all know, that innovative Candide moved to Broadway and ran for 2 years, thus really giving Bob and I guess Chelsea a visibility, and in my case, something I'd only been reading about, those exciting productions of his in the 60s. While I was still in college. So Bob had been doing this mind-bending work. Bob Kalfin had been doing it in New York for well over a decade or so. Chelsea Theater Center was very much on the map, and sometime over those next 8 years it moved to West 43rd Street, the West Side Theater, currently showing Little Shop of Horrors. I followed all the shows they did there over the next 8 years. It was just amazing, so many great evenings of theater. By 1980, I had morphed from a wannabe director into a rather hesitant producer, but I had lucked upon a very serious Broadway success, The Elephant Man, my first producing credit. So I was a very lucky and still young man. That same year, I finally met the pioneering legend Robert Kalfin, as I recall, to discuss a new play. What else? Bob immediately co-opted me into helping him with his own current project, a period musical called Hijinks. I don't know if anybody remembers, based on a really old play, Captain Jinks of the Horse Marines. And anyway, Bob was mounting that to salvage his Chelsea season that year. It was a little traumatic time. They had to cancel their whole season, but managed to get this one musical production on. As often was the case, Chelsea was really struggling with financial battles, like all the not-for-profits. I was only too eager to fall under Bob Kalfin's spell. He was such a dynamo, such a force back then, a man who did not take no for an answer, and with a track record to prove it. Well, Hijinks came and went, a charming potpourri of 1800s songs that found itself up against a similar show called Tintypes, which managed to get to Broadway. That's showbiz. Bob moved on, I moved on. Over the next 30 years, we continued to support each other's endeavors, countless play readings and such, always looking for a play or a musical that we could work on together. That finally happened late in Bob's career. 10 years ago, around 2013, he sent me an amazing script by Alan Light, sitting over there, a play called My Parsifal Conductor. Yes, all about the conflicted character of Richard Wagner, the beauty of the music, the ugliness of the anti-Semitism. It was an important, major play. I was hooked. I had to do it, and with Bob and Alan, and we were going to make it happen. So that was really my one and only true collaboration, but I won't say it was easy. The play went through the normal long development process, rewrites, rejections, doors that were open to us and then shut. Finally, in 2018, Bob, he did my work, he matched us up with the Directors Company and Michael Parva, and we were able to mount a full production here in New York City. And we had wonderful Pat McCorkle. I saw here's Pat as our casting director. And but you know, things have gotten really tough, as everybody knows, in the off-Broadway and not-for-profit sector. I won't even discuss the commercial side, but it's you know. I had a play I was part of on Broadway called POTUS this summer. I don't know if anyone had a great laugh, I hope. It's felt important and wonderful, of course, you know. In another era, it might have run a couple of years, but we're living in the era we're in. And so My Parsifal Conductor did get a rather rave review from the New Yorker. The New Yorker reviewer called it zany, erudite, and humane. And I know, aren't those are the three adjectives we'd like to have for every play we do, I think. Zany, erudite, and humane. I think that actually, those are words I can also associate with Bob and not just the play. In the next 4 years, as you know, it's been rough for Bob, for all of us, to say the least. The pandemic brought theater to a halt. Bob Kalfin, a theater creature, if ever there was one, lived for that next play, the next set of ideas, the next way to jar audiences into taking action. That's what he really believed. That's my belief system too in all this time, I guess. Last year alone, following his terrible bout with COVID, he sent me scripts that excited him so much. One about Madeleine Albright and the Palestinian cause, another about Walt Whitman meeting Oscar Wilde. Bob's enthusiasm and drive were as infectious as ever. In one of his last emails to me, he wrote, "Yes, I am an old dog, fiercely believing in the value of our old tricks. Don't know how to do anything else. For me, making theater is needed nourishment." So, thanks for letting me share that.
Okay, now I've been asked to read a message from a lady named Davy Napoleon. Davy Napoleon is a young woman, well, was a young woman, now she's just a woman. She was the woman who wrote the book called Chelsea on the Edge, which was an extraordinary chronicle of the formation of the Chelsea Theatre Centre, its rise, its apex, and its somewhat fall. But she adored him. They've remained friends to this day. And she asked that I read this because she was unable to come from Ann Arbor, Michigan, where she lives now. His life was with people, lots of people. He trusted people. We met when I was working on my doctorate at NYU, and I wanted to do my dissertation about Chelsea. And he asked me why. And I mumbled why. Kaddish, the screams, Yentl. I doubt I said much more. He gave me access to the theater's files, and a few months later, he was inviting me to rehearsals and board meetings. Heavy stuff. There are directors, like the deceased Harold Prince, for instance, who announce a complete production concept at the first rehearsal and know exactly how they will block it. Bob had ideas, clear, developed ideas. But he made people feel that those ideas were in flux and that all contributions would be welcome. He saw individuals in larger context as part of a society with other people. And when I came to Chelsea, I had studied the theory and the history of acting and directing and design, and I had written plays in college, and I had plenty to say about the work Chelsea had done, and I couldn't wait to learn more about production processes. I didn't know that I would eventually write about the impact of political events in the larger society on the theater. Bob talked to me about all of that. He had me looking at the world surrounding our theater as well as the theater's productions. Bob broadened my perspective. Bob broadened my life. Bob also liked to bring people together. He was a matchmaker. He would bring people onto the same production who seemed to have nothing in common. And he hoped that by doing this, people would connect beyond the artificial boundaries that separate us. And he would encourage people to meet other people that he thought might have something in common. For example, you should talk to Marilyn, he said. You'd like her. That was me. And that is our lovely, lovely friend. Okay, now we have a film presentation by Jack Edelstein with a video message from Tova Felcher.
All right, this is Primary Stages Off-Broadway Oral History Project. Interview number 4, we are talking to Robert Kalfin. Today's date is Wednesday, July 9, 2014. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to do this because it's a subject that is dear to my heart. I just want to give you a quick overview so you can understand why everything I did came about. Is that okay? I was very fortunate in my undergraduate theater work. I went to a small university in upstate New York called Alfred University. This was in the, I don't know, 50s, I guess. And it was a small two-man theater department. And the work they were doing in this theater department was Brecht, Girardot, Inouye, Chekhov, Shakespeare, obviously, all the major hot European playwrights. And as Brecht plays were translated, they were doing them for the first time in this university. I also was, I think they did one of the first productions of Under Milk Wood, things like that. And what was also interesting about that environment was that They were doing environmental productions, proscenium productions, thrust productions. I was in a production of Androcles in the Lion, which was done in this huge gymnasium to turn into a Roman arena. I was in a production of a Greek play, Alcestis of Euripides, which they used the basketball court as the design for the production and the markings on the floor. So I had a very different background in theater to the colleagues I encountered when I went to Yale. When I got into the Yale Drama School, 1954, most of my colleagues had been doing knockoffs of Broadway comedies in college. They didn't have this kind of European international background. They knew about Shakespeare, of course, you know. So that was my theater background. And when I came to the theater with this whole European thing, when I got out of the drama school, Yale, and this was 1957. This was an extraordinary time in the American theater because the idea of nonprofit subscription theater with seasons of plays that were paid for in advance by a subscription audience and grants and etc. had been seeded by the Ford Foundation with seeding 11 regional theaters in an effort to decentralize the American theater. Because the only thing that existed with touring Broadway shows and community theater sort of stuff, except for 9 events at the Alley, who started early to do the idea of having a theater serving a community doing the great works, blah, blah, blah.
And this was 54? Or
That's when 54, I graduated in 57 from Yale.
Okay.
So when I got out of school, that was just happening. And I had a wonderful, crazy job for a moment then. I was hired to go to a cross-country trip and see what was happening in terms of America with the establishment of cultural centers, which was beginning. This period, you know, the 60s, culture was the hula hoop. It was a fad. And so all of the idea of private, foundation funding and private grants and individual grants supporting the arts was new, and people were building cultural centers in various cities and regional theaters with the idea that this would attract business and make the communities more attractive for those reasons as well. And I was hired by someone to go make this cross-country tour just to see what was going on. There was a stunning theater in Portland, Maine, an Edwardian theater that was to die. It was so beautiful, extraordinary acoustics. And a relative of a relative knew about me and my theater. They said, "Would you like to do this?" That's how it happened.
Bob Kalfin, we miss you already. I met Robert Kalfin in 1974. I had made my dramatic debut at the Ethel Barrymore Theatre in a piece called Dreyfus in Rehearsal by Jean-Claude Grunberg. And to that theatre, he sent Yentl the Yeshiva Boy, that was the title at the time, by Isaac Bashevis Singer, adapted by Leah Napolin. I read the script after I was offered Amy in Where's Charlie opposite Raul Julia on Broadway. Once in love with Amy, always in love with Amy. Perfect for me with a person named Tova Feldshuh. You don't want to get typecast, so I was going to take that offer. And I read Yentl the Yeshiva Boy on the 104 bus to return the script to my agent Stark Hesseltine at 119 West 57th Street. And by the time I reached his office, I said, "This play is great. Is it still open?" He said, "Get on the subway and get yourself to the Brooklyn Academy of Music." I auditioned for Bob Kalfin, I think, in a yellow terry cloth robe, high combat boots, and a cap I had that a little boy could wear from fiddler, and then of course I pulled strands of my hair down to create payas. And darn it if he wasn't kind enough to give me the role. And that role would travel from the Brooklyn Academy to the Eugene O'Neill Theater, where Book of Mormon is playing now. And we had a solid season, and I got my first Tony nomination. So I thank you for that. We followed that with Mistress of the Inn at the Roundabout Theater, with a piece on Frida Kahlo, with a 9-performance week of Shana Madel, which we did at the Annenberg Center in Philadelphia. The play and the performances, I had the honor of working with Eleanor Risa on that, were so much in demand, directed by the great Kalfin, that we had to add a 9th performance, so we played 9,000 people a week instead of 8,000. Bob, thank you for all your opportunities, for your belief in me as an artist, for you sticking by me through thick and thin, through our arguments and our agreements. You will be missed, and you will forever live in my heart.
Whoa. Okay. That was pretty great. Okay. Now, I would like to introduce another friend and a colleague, the lovely Natalie Moscow.
Hi, I'm Natalie Moscow, and I know a good number of you from the numerous Kalfin projects we were all fortunate enough to have shared. One of those plays was mine, A Brush with Georgia O'Keeffe, which Bob directed me in 3 separate incarnations. At the workshop on West 36th Street, at Ed Gaines' St. Luke's on West 46th, and finally at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. At the end of the play, the painter, now sightless because of macular degeneration, remarks, "I used to stare straight at the sun, pinwheels and starbursts and violent, strange shapes imprinting themselves on my retina as if it were a photographic plate. I used to roam the desert, no hat, no gloves, no glasses, feeling and seeing my world exactly as it was and then making my sensations into a work of art. Now I sit in a sun that burns through to my bones and watch the shapes group and regroup in my head. In there, I'm still painting. I suspect, like Georgia up until the end, Bob was puzzling over better forms of expression for his book or smarter solutions to problems presented by his last plays. In there, he was still painting. At the end of my play, Georgia expresses a desire to live in a tent, just open the flaps and let the wind blow through. A wind that sends my ashes swirling. That would be some wonderful kind of wind. Mirages wiped out by the wind. To simply stand out in space and have nothing. Well, Bob, how does that feel? Thank you.
What was it the comic says, my we are verklempt? We are verklempt. I would like to introduce now a longtime friend, colleague, collaborator, and probably a hell of a dancer, Philip Himber.
Hi, everybody. I met Bob Kalfin in February 1972, so about a year before you did. I was 18, and he was 38, and we had over 50 years of a very special friendship for which I am profoundly grateful. When I sat by Bob's bedside at hospice, and I was there with his family, his incredible niece, who was here today, Elizabeth, and her brother Josh, who I had known since they were toddlers. in typical Bob style, he turned to me and said, "Sorry to be such a burden." And I said, "Don't be so Jewish." And then I took his hand in mine and held it, and he turned to me and said, "Why are you here? Why am I here?" And I thought, what do I say to this extraordinary human being, the first man who I deeply loved, and who loved me, and who literally changed the trajectory of my life? I had arrived at the Chelsea Theater Center at the Brooklyn Academy of Music one very blustery February day. I can remember it as if it were yesterday. And I was an Oberlin College intern taking a semester off from the classroom to learn about the New York professional theater. To this day, I have not a clue why my parents allowed me to do that. I walked into the auditorium during a tech rehearsal of something called Kaddish, where I saw this swarthy, curly-haired director moving 8 directions at once, overseeing the complex interactions of live actors and lighting and sound, and taped video and live video, which was not done that much in those days. And amidst it all, in the center was this extraordinary woman, Marilyn Criss, who also became a touchstone for me. Over the next 4 months, under Bob's mentorship and caring, and for many years after, I would grow, I would actually transform, I would say, in really unimagined ways. My understanding of art, of independent theater, of what real artistic vision looked like, and real risk, of how to meet endless challenges, of the key to leading a company, of collaboration. All of that was defined for me for the first time in a way that would always be who I was, I think, in the theater. All of that, and also what it meant to be a young gay man. I would forever carry Bob's imprint and Bob's warm, Hamish spirit and his affection for me as I journeyed through life. I still think that I see the world often through Bob Kalfin's eyes. Those Chelsea days were full and rich. In some ways, they were the happiest time of my young life. I worked on the Beggars Opera as a casting director. One day, I answered a very angry call from an actor's agent, demanding that his client be seen for the role of Polly Peachum. The agent insisted that the playwright himself, John Gay, wanted her to do this role. John Gay had died in 1732. So I asked Bob, what do I say? And he said, I want you to call the agent back and tell him that if John Gay was recommending this actress, she was obviously way too old. She would be 300 years old now. And I actually did that, and then I hung up. I got to see Marilyn Criss create her indelible portrayal of Naomi in Kaddish. Later on, I assisted with the casting of Hal Prince's revival of Candide. Joanna Merlin, Hal, and I sitting at the Schubert Theater, which had this set for a little night music on it. I was like 18 and 19 years old. And Hal turning to me and Bob and Joanna and telling us what he was looking for. I remember going back to the Chelsea offices and going through the 8x10 glossies, trying to find, he wanted a Cunegonda who could sing coloratura like no one's business, but who looked like a cartoon. That's what Hal said. And I found amongst the piles Maureen Brennan, who had just graduated from Cincinnati, and I said, she looks a bit like a cartoon. And she came in and auditioned and made her Broadway debut. I was very proud of that. And yes, if you read that incredible book, Chelsea on the Edge, which needs to be reprinted, I am credited in that book with sending Isaac Bashevis' short story, Yentl, the Yeshiva Boy, to Bob with a note saying, you should make a play of this. It's all you. I have a story about Tova, but I'll save that for later. I was living a kind of dream, and I kind of knew it as I bridged the childhood imaginings of theater with the reality of how passionate, true professional theater comes to be. Some of Bob's belief in me was misplaced. When the Beggars Opera moved from BAM to the McAlpin Rooftop Theater in Manhattan, Bob suggested me as the non-equity assistant stage manager. My job was to sweep and mop the stage floor and assure that the cast was signed in and at places. All those great women in that production, Kathleen Widows, Marilyn Sokol, Tanya McDonald, they thought I was just too adorable. So adorable that when I called places one day, they playfully wrestled me into their dressing room, where they proceeded to hide me under their giant Carrie Fishbein Robbins designed Hogarthian skirts. So when the PSM came bellowing down the hall, "Where the hell is Philip?" he found me under their skirts, and I was promptly fired for not having control over the cast. Of course, they all felt terrible and took up a collection for me. As our friendship grew, Bob uplifted me in countless ways. He came to see the first play I ever directed back at college. A year later, he cast me as Lindstrom, the young consumptive sculptor, in Ibsen's The Lady from the Sea, starring Marilyn Criss at the New Repertory Company on West 43rd Street. And I think he did that mostly so I could understand from the inside what a real rehearsal was like and what an actor's responsibility was. And because I was likely not the greatest actor, he encouraged me endlessly to think about what I might bring to the theater as a director. Bob and I never lost touch through the decades. He told me he schept nachis when I found my footing as an associate producer at Playwrights Horizons in the earliest years. And when he came to see my production of the Dybbuk at Playwrights Horizons in Queens, he left saying, "I am quelling." He was proud when I launched my career at the Sundance Theater Program, when I became president of the board of TCG, an organization he had founded, and he celebrated my life choices, my parade of boyfriends and lovers, and there were quite a few of those back in those days. More recently, during the pandemic, my husband and I moved out of New York to a little town up north. When Bob found out that we were commuting into Manhattan several times a week, 90 minutes each way, and looking for a place to lay our heads at night once the lockdown ended, he offered us his and George's rent-controlled apartment on West 20th Street, which he had begun living in 1959. So 50 years after he and I met, there I was, back in the very same home he and George had shared together. If you had told the 18-year-old kid back in 1972, hey, 50 years from now, you're going to be back living in this apartment of Bob's with your now husband. So when Bob turned to me last September 18th and asked why I was there, I told him simply, because you changed my life, Robert. You taught me how to tell stories on stage, about how to take risks. And the greatest gift, for some miraculous reason, you saw me. You saw something in this gawky teenager who knew from nothing. And that gift of yours made all the difference in my life. You taught me to hold on to life, and this is his quote, hold on to life the way a terrier holds on to a stick in his jaw. You were extravagantly optimistic, looked for the best in everyone, and we laughed a hell of a lot. And so I'm here today because I love you. We all love you. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, and now, Robert Moss, will you please come to the stage? We're waiting for you, and you're making a wonderful entrance. Let's give a round of applause.
I make every wrong turn.
But you made the right turn and you're here.
You're here. That's the important
How I got here.
Okay, but you're here. Okay.
I owe Bob a lot. When I moved to East Hampton, 74, I guess, Bob said, "Do you need a bed?" I said, "Yeah, we need 2 beds." He said, "I got a bed for you." And he gave us an antique bed, which I still sleep in. When he was working at Brooklyn University, he asked me if I would teach a class. Of course, he was so impractical in many ways. There was no room for this class, but he wanted me to teach it. So I was teaching in the basement in a hallway. And people were always walking back and forth, but that was the space we had. When he went to Cincinnati, he asked me to direct a play there, which I did. I went out and directed. we only had one conversation about a script. I can't remember the playwright, but it was Josephine the Mouse Singer. Is the playwright here by any chance? No, all right. It was a play about mice. And Josephine was this incredible singer who came out of her house every day at 12 noon and sang. That's all she did. And then she went back in. And the whole town was transfixed by it. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
Yes. So we were going to, he and I was running Playwrights Horizons. We were going to talk about it. And as I was going down the stairs of Playwrights to have lunch with Bob and to talk about Josephine, Andre Bishop followed me down the stairs saying, "Please don't give the theater away. Please don't give the theater away." I said, "Don't worry." And I said to Bob, "It's a really lovely play and a lovely idea, but don't you think it needs some work textually?" And he said, "Oh, who cares about that? Think about those ears. Think about those tails." I said, okay, I'll think about those things. And we never did it. And I don't know that the rewrite ever happened, but it was a lovely play. I was very active on the New York State Council on the Arts, and it was sort of my club. And because Bob was in Brooklyn and I was in Queens, I thought this is a match made in heaven for the council. So I talked them into funding one production that would travel from Brooklyn to Queens. I don't know that anybody really thought about the fact that our stage bore no resemblance whatsoever to the theater in Brooklyn. And it took 2 whole days to move the set in because it wasn't designed to be in the Queens Theater in the Brook. It was a huge production for a little theater. I think the council was proud, but that was the only time they did that. But Bob was important to me, not because of all of these lovely things he did for me, but because of his productions. And the one that I remember the most was Slave Ship. I knew about it. I knew what it was going to be about, and I thought, okay, it's going to be a tough sit, but I'm going to be there. And when I walked into the theater, there was Ed Bullens and Leroy and the rest of the black hierarchy in African garb, sitting at the end of the room, and I thought, whoa, this is serious. I think there were maybe 200 people in the audience, but only 4 other people that were white besides me. And it was a terrifying experience that I will never forget. At one point, someone asked a question, and you could only stand up and respond if you were black. So the 4 or 5 of us that were not black sat there, terrified. When I got out of the theater, I thought, I'm going to kill Bob Kalfin. How dare he do that to me? And for 2 weeks, I couldn't get it out of my mind, and I was so angry at him, until one day I realized that I'd had the best theater experience of my life. And I remember thinking at that time that I was so proud to be in the same business as Bob Kalfin. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Bob. I have to say one more thing about him. In September of 1975, which is beginning our 2nd season on 42nd Street, I needed help. I couldn't do it all by myself. So I called Bob Kalfin. I said, do you know anybody who would come and be my assistant? I have a little money for it. And he had Philip there, and he said, well, I'll send you Philip. So he sent me Philip. And that changed my life. Philip was, at that point, crucial to the life of Playwrights Horizons. I gave him Queens to run, and Andre ran 42nd Street, and I sat on top. But Philip was the love of my life for the 3 years that he was with us. And I'm grateful for that every single day. For all the things that Bob did, that's the cherry on top of the cake.
And I remember one of Bob's favorite sayings was, "Don't worry, we'll fix it in rehearsal." Most of the time we did. Most of the time. And the times we didn't, it was okay and worth the trip. Anyway, we're coming to another musical number by extraordinary Anthony Evans and Tina Fabrique. And after that, I have a poem to read to you. But please, first, these wonderful, wonderful musicians that he adored. Please.
Being here today to pay tribute to Bob Kalfin started me thinking about Bob's openness and friendliness to everyone. He always reached out with such warmth and sincerity. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this a better world if you can. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this a better place if you can. Now, this was a song Bob understood and loved. He believed in diversity. He loved to bring people together, all kinds of people, just as we are here together now. So, reach out and touch somebody's hand. Make this world a better place. Yeah. If you can.
rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember him. At the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember him. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. And at the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer and swimming, we remember him. And at the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. As long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we have joy that we wish, that we crave to share, we remember him. And when we have achievements that are based on him, we remember him. And as long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us as we remember Robert Zangrel Kalfin. My dear, dear heart, may you rest in peace. May you be with George. May you be free of pain. May you watch us as we will remember you and have you in our hearts. And I thank you. I thank you, one and all, for celebrating today.
I'd just like to invite the family. You are our family. You were Bob's family. You are Bob's family. But we are some of the blood relatives. Well, Bob didn't have his own children. I consider myself, in a way, one of Bob's kids. That I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, thinking about Bob, going to visit Bob's mother, Hilda, in Florida. We'd always speak of her over a tuna fish sandwich, thinking about the amazing cruises that Bob was going to go on, and traveling the world, and ultimately he helped to shape some of my development. Now I want to invite Josh in a moment to share, and then we'll also recognize the power of being in this synagogue space, the power of being in this holy theater, when each of us can raise up our voices and say amen. And with each amen that we'll share, we will lift God's soul. We will lift Bob's soul.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, everyone. This is a fantastic tribute, and just thought I would add a little bit of flavor from the other parts of Bob's life. I met Bob in 1962. He was my Uncle Bob. He had super hard-working parents with lots of extended family, lots of extended family, and many of those people were crucial for feeding and sometimes demanding creativity, political astuteness, and that also provided understanding and a place of refuge when his parents struggled with Bob's choices. He was also an incredible klutz. Anyone who knew him and worked with him knew you had to watch when he stepped over line. When he had a glass in his hand, you had to be careful where you sat at the table if there was red wine. You could see his laptop with the stickers all over it that he never remembered his passwords. And modern technology, things like cars were really difficult for him, as witnessed by the many colored fenders he often had. He also knew that doing creative art was something that was deep in his soul, regardless of those technical challenges. I remember as a kid making waterfalls and ponds in the stream that was meant to drain our backyard. It's not always what other responsible adults might recommend, and Bob didn't hesitate. He loved doing these projects. And I should have known better when I was a 14-year-old visiting our grandma, his mom, in Florida, to ask for shaving lessons. I was 14. And I didn't know it would do like 4 or 5 different steps with warm towels and bombs, and then a trimmer which was on a cord that swept the bombs and lotions off the counter, and then getting lessons in using a styptic pencil to get all the blood on your face, and then band-aids for your fingers from picking up the shards on the floor with the broken lotions and bombs. And his creativity was not constrained by practical things, right? So we can only ascribe his incredible success and such incredible and really important works. Really important works. He didn't do things for money, clearly. He did them because they were important and they needed to be heard. And you all helped him do that. Whether it was musicals or plays or readings, it was important. And he understood that. And it was that understanding and patience and genius moments that allowed his creativity to turn to works of art, to find funders, to keep creditors at bay, and those people all around him. And I have to say that in those final days, taking care of him and being there to get his wisdom. He loved to share his wisdom. He used to love to say that he's happy being old. He's wise now. That's right. I'm so glad to be old. I'm so glad to share my knowledge. What do you want to know about me? And he asked in his hospice bed, what now? What happens next? What's the next scene? I said, Bob, you've read so many plays about this. There's so many scenes and so many plays. It's just like, what do you think happens? And he said, what do you think? And I said, well, some of us believe we'll be reunited with all the friends and family we've lost and pets, and we'll be frolicking in some angelic place. And I said, and you'll be with George again. And he looked at me with this look that everybody here knows. He raises one arched eyebrow, severely high eyebrow, like, what the heck? And then he says, whatever. And that was Bob. He allowed the creativity and the open ideas to come to him and to help steer his direction as much as he helped steer others' directions. And I think that's what allowed his creativity to blossom and all of us to benefit. So thank you all for helping our uncle be such an amazing person and celebrating him today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lila. I'm also one of the cousins, and I'm speaking on behalf of my mom today, who unfortunately is stuck on an Amtrak. So these are her words. For me, Bob was larger than life as a kid, and then as an adult, a cherished cousin and colleague in the arts. We spent many hours talking about theater and music, sharing stories and meals. I learned so much from him, and I think he made a great impression on my kids, which I can attest to. I know my parents loved him dearly, and that Will loved the work they shared in Florida. Bob was a night owl who always wanted to talk deep into the night, rose later in the morning, and enjoyed a good breakfast, usually reading the latest script around noon. Bob was a foodie, and we enjoyed making our grandmother's recipes and feasting together at holidays. He spent hours upon hours in my kitchen discussing lighting and set design with me, and sharing the several versions of his quite good book. His experience in professional theater was really quite different than my herding middle school children, and we often laughed about the similarities and differences. Most similar was what I refer to as the Schulman trait. We seemed to be able to make creative stuff out of found objects and junk. It was how I created almost every prop and costume, and although Bob's budget was bigger, he did the same through extraordinary perspective and staging. He used the arts to help every voice feel heard and build community. Truly, I wish he rests in great peace.
So now I'm going to ask that all of us rise, that we use the power of this moment. There are going to be 5 times that we say Amen. This is our rehearsal. This is our moment. This is our life. And we are preparing now for Olam Haba, the world to come. So I ask our family members to come forward to read the words of the Kaddish, which will only take 50 seconds. And in these 50 seconds, let's envision, let's really see Bob with us now. Bob connected to God in heaven for eternity. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Be'alma tigrach hiruteh, be'amlich malchuteh, b'chayechon u'b'yomechon u'b'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'b'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemet kudesha b'rechu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'miran be'ama v'imru. Amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimrama, uyaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Join me if you can. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. You raise me up to more than I can be.
Well, no, I'm not the director. There's only one director in my life. We should be over, but I think we have another few minutes, so I would like to read something that, Philip, where are you? Okay, I would like to read something that Natalie gave me from his friend Dale Sewell. Bob Kalfin was a true individual with a heart as deep and true as his theatrical imagination was wide. He has graduated from Earth School, summa cum laude. I have no doubt that the flights of angels who sang this sweet prince to his rest when his earthly heart cracked have now been cast by him in a reading, which will commence as soon as he is released from enjoying this tribute. I imagine his opening remarks to those angels, after saying thank you, of course, will be what his Chelsea Theatre's mission statement said: we will do whatever nobody else is doing and what we think people ought to see, as he said. And that gave me great leeway. A great talent requires great leeway. Dear Bob, I thank you for our work together and our friendship, love, Dale Sewell's, and all of us, and all of you, and all of his family. May he rest in peace and be with George, and may we remember him always. May his name be a blessing. Alavai. Thank you, thank you.
say one more thing, one final thing on June Ballinger, and I was participating in Bob getting his book. It was mentioned his book. He's written a wonderful book about directing for young directors, for young theater people. And if there's one big takeaway I have from him, and for the many, many years I've worked with him both as an actress and as a producer, when I became producer, was that Bob leads from the heart. And intuition and instinct come from when you lead from the heart. And if this book tells us anything, and for young theater artists emerging, it is to, that's why this book is so important, to read it and learn not only our history and of the values and of how compassion and empathy and trust and taking the time to read everything and have that passion that Bob had is so vital for creating a rich, vibrant theater to continue. We're in a little bit of flux right now. There's a lot of wonderful changes going on, and you know, we're going through a lot of transition in the theater. But I think this is an important book. And Kay Radke, who could not be here today because she had a flu, she and I are committed to making sure that that book does get published. It is in the hands of a agent. So if anyone has any advice or help, please let me know. June Ballinger, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a little more time before we're forced out of this joint. Anybody else like to speak? Anybody would like to speak from your seat, come up here, whatever, you're more than welcome to. Because we all loved him, and you may say in words that come from your heart if you want to.
Yeah, well, I worked with Bob in screens in '71. He had seen me in Ickley Library Theater, John Fitzgibbon, and he came backstage. I met him for the first time, and he said, "I'd like your audition for Minos the Balanakis," and I did, and I got the part of the Legionnaire that got strangled by Julie Lovaso.
Oh, God, yes.
Changing point in my life. And I didn't see him for a long while. We kept sort of in touch, but we lost touch too, until he cast me through a submission by an agent that I'm no longer with, but the agent said, "You probably won't get this, but I'll send you anyway." And then there was Bob, and it was to play at the Coconut Grove Theater, opposite Loretta Swit in A Passionate Woman. This was in the 90s, so this was a good 20, 25 years later. And I went down and worked with him, and Loretta Swit was very dismissive of him as a director. And I said to him after about 5 days, I said, "Bob, how do you do it? How do you put up with this?" Because it was water off a duck's back. And he said, "Oh, I'm used to it down here. That's why they hire me down here." Handle these people. There's nothing. And then we were walking out, and he says, "And by the way, John," he says, "I have to apologize to you." And I said, "Apologize to me?" He said, "Yes, because all these years, and I didn't use you."
Oh.
How often do you get something like that said to you? So
and he brought us back together again. We did the screens, and
yeah.
then we were starting on the journey for Secondhand Smoke, which
That's
never
right.
came to pass.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
Anybody else like to speak? You're all more than welcome. And it kind of makes you feel good too if you want to speak, please.
Yeah, my name is Louis Schrager. So full disclosure, I'm not from the theater world. I'm actually a physician from Bethesda, Maryland, and I got introduced to Bob when he came into Washington to direct a reading of a play based on the Defiant Requiem effort that detailed the struggles of creativity in Theresian style on the part of the Jews who were yeah, exactly, right. So I got introduced to him there, and I, in fact, do write plays, and I had an opportunity to be introduced to him, and I was somewhat timid in going up to him and asking if he might read one of my scripts. We talked about it for a while, and he said, "Sure, send it to me." I didn't think I had half a chance of even hearing back from him, because that happens a lot. But I did hear back. And And he got quite interested in the script, and in fact, your reference to the Madeleine Albright negotiation between the Israelis and the Palestinians was the script I had written. And it never actually got produced, unfortunately, but he was working really hard at it, and he taught me, not only did he teach me about theater, but he actually believed it. It was just such a wonderful feeling to have someone with this kind of experience actually not look at what your background is and just look at the words on the page and say, I'm going to take this seriously, and it just meant all the world to me. So we became a close friend. We also used to talk at least once a week, and I always look forward to that. So I won't really miss it.
Thank you. The play is not dead yet, I'm sure. Anybody else like to speak? Please.
Hi, my name is Faye Russell.
Oh, please, come up here, Faye. Please.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. This is Faye's dear friend. She was his caretaker for quite some time. Okay. He adored her. He loved her, and here she is. She has no speech. She just has soul.
And I never ever talked in front of a bunch of people in my life. I couldn't even do it in high school. Sorry. But Bob, oh my God, I met Bob in 2017, taking care of a friend of his, and I met Roseanne at the same time. And that man changed my whole entire life. Like, he believed in me when nobody else in this whole world would ever believe in me. And he always made you smile, even when you were sad. That's why this is a happy occasion, but I don't know why I'm crying, but it's just there. He was my friend. I wasn't his caregiver, he was my friend. And he will always be my friend. And I am still grieving because I missed a man. And we would go out to dinner, and everybody knew Bob was gay, but I was his wife. And I just went along with it. He made my life, and he really made my life, and I miss him, and I'm gonna miss Bob, and I thank everybody today for coming out for him. He talked, I don't know you, Anthony, but he talked a lot about your music all the time. He talked about you. I met Queen Esther Merrill because of Bob and Roseanne. I met a lot of important people just by hanging with Bob. Bob was he was my dinner partner. I haven't been out to dinner since he left, but that was my man. And I'm nervous.
Bob's directorial body of work is pretty impressive.
Oh my God, yes, very impressive.
Where did you and he first?
Well, we met with the production of Queenie Pie, which was something that was going to be touring throughout places like Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, and it was taking place in Harlem, and it was a piece that Duke Ellington created, but he didn't finish it. So there were all these people that wanted to finish it, people that were involved in the production, the director, and the music director, and people like that. They all wanted to provide the ending of this piece, and he had to be the one to connect everybody, saying, "Oh no, well, this person's going to do this, and that person's going to," recognizing everyone, giving everyone due respect, but keeping it all intact until we opened. It was really a miracle that he did that.
I've been filming for Mercedes.
Oh, I've known Mercedes for years. Yeah. Because I sang with the Duke Ellington Orchestra for several years. And so that's how I got the gig. I did Queenie Pie, and at the end of the Queenie Pie, we had a big party. And that night, Mercer asked me to join the band.
Yeah, and I toured with them for about 3 years.
Oh, I've gotten some wild stories from Mercedes about Mercer.
Oh, there are
Some of his
many.
lady friends.
Oh, there are
Delores.
many. Yes, yes, there are many. And the way that he'd say to the producer or the owner of the establishment that we're going to work in, "I'm not going to do this right now." And he big guy, and everybody would just cower, and he said, "Okay, that's the way I want it." That was Mercer, But he was a darling man. Other than that, he just would get a little feisty, and he'd get his way, and he was fine.
Did you work with Bob on anything else after that?
I did a couple of readings. One reading I did with Marilyn, and I had to learn a prayer in Hebrew. I was so scared, but I did it, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was just an experience, and it was a lovely cast, and I had a great time.
What was it about his directorial style that you liked or enjoyed?
What I enjoyed about him is that he recognized everyone's
Mention
abilities.
his name, if you will.
Okay. Bob Kalfin, he realized who was good at what. He knew everybody's points, and he knew how to utilize them, and he knew how to get an actor. He was kind to actors, so he knew how to get an actor to really extend themselves in what was needed. And he was real good at being, putting people together. He was the best at that.
It's perfect.
Oh, sure.
I'm so happy you're here.
Yes.
What a nice surprise. Thank you. It was wonderful.
I was lucky to meet Robert Kalfin and then have Robert Kalfin collaborate with me as my director for a few of my plays. It was a wonderful experience. What I learned from Robert is that Bob told me, first of all, he taught me so many things. He taught me the joy of making theater. He was always extremely kind to the actors, amazingly kind, and to me, the writer, and to really everybody whom he encountered. He really was extremely positive about everything, always in the moment. He was a man who lived in the moment, and so that made him full of life. And that's really how I remember Bob, a man full of life and full of artistic ability, great artistic talent. So thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see the slideshow. Thank you. Had mentioned earlier that you and Bob have quite a bit of grease paint under your bridge together.
Yes.
Tell me about it. Mention his name.
Oh, Robert Zangwill Kalfin. He and I met, oh dear, I'm going to start to cry. I said I wouldn't do that. But we met in the early to mid-60s, and he had fire in the belly as a director, and I had fire in the belly as an actress, and we drank more coffee than I want to think about. And I did graduate to wine, so I mean, I have grown up somewhat. And we just wanted to do plays. He wanted to do plays. I wanted to do plays. We did them in churches and synagogues and firehouses and all over the joint. And then we had a bad experience on a play, and I think it planted the seeds for him for the Chelsea Theatre Centre. He and George Barry and George Morfogen and two fellows from Yale started the Chelsea Theatre Centre. Again, in churches, in synagogues, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, wherever. And then he got the BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and he was excitable, and he was enthusiastic, and he made you feel important. And I went to his 89th birthday in April. And part of what we talked about, he and his friend and caretaker Faye and I talked about, was what we're going to do for the 90th, because the 90th is going to be a big one. The ones with fives and zeros get to be
this
big.
Is the 90th.
Well, I would rather he be here and not have to pretend it. But he's with his partner, George. He's free of pain, and he's here. He will forever live in our hearts, forever live in our minds, and it's our loss. But it's his game.
When you think about his body of work and his directorial
Oh my dear.
style.
Oh my dear, the style was whatever the material needed. He adapted the style. That was his style. His style was to put the play on the way he and the playwright thought it should be put on. It wasn't that, oh, he does light comedies. Oh, he does a lot of lights. he did what the piece needed. I worked on something with him called Kaddish, which was from the poem by Allen Ginsberg, and before it was popular, I'm talking about early 70s, he did the triptychs, and he had the two wonderful guys who played something called Video Free America. I'm still in contact with them. They're in San Francisco, and they put together pieces of stuff that the protagonist was here on stage, and then she was here before she was taken to the funny farm, here in the back of an ambulance saying goodbye, where am I going, and here when she finally got to the destination. And it was extraordinary then. It would still be extraordinary, but the technology is catching up to him. And I just wish that all the illnesses and the age had not caught up to him, because I thought he'd be here forever.
He
really did.
just exuded that kind of energy.
He just wanted to do everything, wanted to take a bite out of everything. Constantly had 2 briefcases full of plays. Oh, this play must be done. It's the best play in the world. Oh, no, this play must be done. He wanted to do everything.
Wow.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And he included everybody. It was extraordinary.
What an incredible foundation.
Did you know him at all?
I did not. I'm sad to say I did not, but...
He was hot stuff.
These stories, the testimonials, I'm so glad we're doing these, because this
yeah.
stuff is important.
You
getting this history.
You should look at the Casey Child's oral history of the off-Broadway movement. He has a piece on it. There's a small piece of it here in the piece that Jack has assembled, and you should watch the whole piece. He's really quite extraordinary.
Do you mind if I ask what the circumstances were that on the project you worked together that turned
There was
south?
just one.
But
just
what
one.
were the circumstances? Were they with the other production team, or?
No. He was not allowed to be the director. There were producers that brought in their people, and I'm not sure I don't know how it could be that you don't agree on the concept once you've signed a contract with your soul when you go to do a play. And he was very unhappy and left the production.
Well, good for him. I mean, for knowing
Yeah,
the
well, it was not.
trajectory was not for him.
It was not. It was not for him,
And
and it was a big bomb.
How did you
it was
work
a big
together?
bomb.
How you worked on it though? You continued.
I had to leave in the middle because I got a job in California, but I probably would not have taken it had he been there. But
a play? It was a
no, a movie. It was a movie. Love with a Proper Stranger, with Steve McQueen and Natalie Wood, and it was a hoot. Really was a hoot. I was very young, and it was the first movie I think I'd ever done, and it was really quite something. Anyway, that has to do with Robert. But he left, and I think that it was a good thing because it planted the seeds that he knew he had to have his own theater. And
sometimes that's what has to happen.
Something has to happen.
Something.
Yeah. And he hit some kind of a wall.
But how kind of exciting that you were able to experience that together, although it probably didn't feel exciting at the time.
No, it didn't feel exciting at the time. It was very sad, and it was very hard to go on with it.
But you worked again together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was at the beginning. Then he did Chelsea, and we did Junebug Graduates Tonight in a church, and we did Upper Depths or Lower Depths, whatever it was called, down on 2nd Avenue. And we did Kaddish first in BAM, and then The Circle in the Square. Oh, no, we were constantly doing readings. He was always doing reading. He always had another 5 plays he wanted to do.
Oh, my goodness.
Extraordinary. Just extraordinary. And it was fun.
What an incredible
But it was also fun. He was a great swimmer. Very important to him. It was very, very important.
And it's not easy to swim through grease paint, is it?
Well, he swam through grease paint. But it's a pleasure to know you, Michael, and I got to get set up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm here. I'm Natalie Moscow, and I'm here to talk about Bob Kalfin. Bob Kalfin and I first met through a mutual friend, Ray Allen, who was an actress and a director. And he started using me in readings, and this was more than 20 years ago, and he eventually directed my play on George O'Keeffe and a lot of other readings that I participated in. And we're here today to celebrate the fact that he never stopped creating until he stopped. And who knows, maybe he's still creating.
89 years of creation.
Thank you.
And then some. Do you have any projects that stick out in terms of being memorable?
With him?
Yeah.
Well,
does it really resonate?
Well, apart from A Brush with George O'Keeffe, which we did in 3 different places, and I'm going to be talking about that a little bit, including at the Smithsonian Institute. That was really exciting because for me, when I started the project on Georgia O'Keeffe, which I wrote and played in, I always dreamt of having her paintings around me, and we had done it in a semi-realistic setting with projections. When we went to the Smithsonian, and the projections were mostly of her artwork, although there was some photographs as well. When we went to the Smithsonian, we had to modify the staging, so we sat on stools, talked to the back wall to address each other, and this giant screen was behind with all these paintings, which were just over everything, overarching. So that was very, very exciting for me. I've done Bob Carmen's The Waiting Room with Roger, who's here today. We did so many readings. Petya, which was about Tchaikovsky. I mean, so many wonderful readings, so many wonderful memories.
Well, when you're dealing with a director that's got a good heart and is malleable to the pieces at hand and seems to be kind of a shapeshifter as a director.
I think he made each project his favorite project as he was working on it. And it didn't matter if it was Broadway, if it was off Broadway, if it was off, it was just a reading. That was his favorite project at the moment. And he put just as much commitment to it as he would to something he wasn't about stars or scoring points or press agents, nothing like that. He was really just into the work. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're ready whenever you're ready.
Oh, I hope I don't mess it up, but you can fix that.
Mess it up. Off the cuff. Yeah, go for it.
Don't worry, it's going to be great. Hiya.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Yeah.
Save me a seat next to you near the front.
Go for it.
Okay, I'm who I am. Yeah, I'm Irene Stockton. I was Bob Kalfin's casting director for almost 28 years. 28 wonderful years. But how we started was totally different. He wanted a friend of mine to cast a play called The Gift Horse, a Jewish rep. And she wasn't available, so she called him and said, I can't do this, but I'm giving you Irene Stockton. He said, I want you. I don't know Irene Stockton. I don't want Irene Stockton. So a few weeks into...
She's like, just relax. Give it a shot.
Yeah, and he did. So when I put together all the actors for The Gift Horse, and we had our first, call, he was sitting next to me, and he a little begrudgingly the whole time about me. And the first actor came in and was fabulous, and we were going like, elbow, 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 elbow. Oh my God, he's so good, or she's so great.
Yeah.
And from then on, we were a unit.
And how many projects do you think you worked on total?
Oh my God, I can't imagine.
Too many to count.
I was pulling together a lot of them recently just to get the names of people I had to notify about today.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of projects. My favorite one, I think, was called, Willie B. Came Into the Sun was one of my favorites. And while I'm on Willie B. Came Into the Sun, the actress who was in it sent me some quotes that I hope I can get through without messing them up.
You're not going to mess him up. It'll be hilarious. He was a funny guy too, right?
Very funny. And the first rehearsal, he said, best idea in the room wins. And since I'm the director, I'll get the credit for whoever has input on this. So that was one quote. There was another wonderful one. Oh, yeah, opening night of Willie B. Came Into the Sun. He said, okay, kids, you're going to go out there on your own. You've sucked on my tits long enough. I hope I quoted that properly.
That was pretty succinct. Oh my God, that's hilarious. The love that you and everybody here have in their hearts for this person, I feel so sad that I didn't get a chance to meet him, but just getting these testimonials, and I know the memorial is just going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
So happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy you're here too.
Well, it's important. It's important to get these things documented.
Absolutely. So,
that was beautiful.
Am I done?
Sure, unless you can think of something else.
If I think of something else, I'll come back.
Yeah. Thank you.
I hope I didn't close my eyes too much, because when I start thinking.
That's funny.
So Bob asked me, "Don't you still want to act anymore? You were an actress." And I said, "No, I don't think so." And for one thing, I don't think I could remember the lines. If it was improv, I'd be there.
Oh my God! Well, that's even more difficult. What was it about improv that you loved? Just the spontaneity.
The spontaneity, and when I studied acting with Uta Hagen and Irene Daly, they were, we would have a lot of improv, going for your accent and getting your result.
Like I said, I don't know his body of work, but I want to throw this name in just on the chance that you or he had any connectivity with Kim Stanley. Was he around when Kim Stanley was
Yeah, he gave. He gave. No, but he gave Meryl Streep her first Broadway show.
Which one?
Oh, so you want me to talk about it?
Sure.
Oh, yes. Bob gave Meryl Streep her first Broadway show. It might have even been her equity card. I'm not sure. But definitely Broadway show. It was called Happy End. And he was a Broadway director at that time.
That's
Incredible.
Luminaries. Go for it.
I don't know exactly which play Frank Langella. Oh, I know, Prince of Hamburg. That was the play, and it was. He also did a video of it. It's on Bob's website, actually, a clip of that video.
That was fun. That was hard. Rehearsal. 1 week. 1 week rehearsal. That was. Oh yeah. We all had to be like the outdoors.
We gotta keep them down.
I'm David Edwards, and I met Bob Kalfin at, I'm not even sure whether it was an audition before the play that he cast me in, but he cast me in a wonderful play off-Broadway called The Disputation. I played a troubled young priest, and I was so thrilled to be a part of this because it was a really heavy dramatic role, and I'd been doing a lot of musicals up to then. And the best thing about it too is that Bob never thought of me as a strictly musical theater performer. In fact, a few years ago he came to see something where I was singing at 54 Below, and he said, I didn't know you sang. So I didn't know whether he had just sort of forgotten, or he just was so intent on casting me in non-musicals that it's so hard to be typecast in New York, but Bob was never one to do that. He saw me in so many different guises. In fact, the last thing we did together, it was a play that we workshopped for so many years that I finally grew out of the role. And when he finally did do the play, he brought me in for a much older character, and I didn't get it. But yeah, I was. But I can't. Wait. Maybe it'll come to me. See, unlike Bob, my memory is not like a steel trap.
I'm sure that you remember stylistically. Obviously, he was incredibly accessible, and seemed to be a bit of a shapeshifter in terms of kind of molding himself.
He really did love the idea of mentoring young actors, and he did that for me, and always brought me in for very unusual projects. And it was such a pleasure to audition for, and even more pleasure to work with him as a director. So, because he knew there was a paycheck at the end of that. So, oh, thank you.
Really great to meet you.
Yes, we do. Welcome to New York. No, we should. But, you know, it's great that we did yes. That was great.
Just had this would allow me to buy a place for the last day. So, yeah, it
Let's talk. I don't want to be
My name is Tamara Flanagan. I met Bob Kalfin many years ago. I can't remember an exact date. I feel like he's always been in my life as an angel on my shoulder, keeping me positive about myself and my career. I will miss him dearly, but I am grateful that I have his voice in my head.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leslie Dockery, and I've known Bob for several years. My last encounter that I remember, we had lunch together on Broadway near Lincoln Center. And he always had such words of wisdom. And he always made me believe in myself and see that I was one who was a old, fidgety, evil little girl. He showed me, no, Leslie, the world isn't like that. There's still hope, and you just keep on doing what you're doing. He was amazing. He made me feel like I was Superwoman. So, and I thank him for that.
He lit my life up. I was the caregiver, supposed to be lighting up his life, but he didn't realize he was lighting up my life. And I was his driver, and it was something like that taxi cab confession, you know, when people would get in the car. And that's how it was with me and Bob. He was my man. And we would go to the beach together, and I would bring my wagon and put all our stuff in it and bring it down just so he could go and do his swim. And then there was times when he would just want to go down there, and I would make sure I'd be there to pick him up. But I love that man, and I'm actually still grieving for him. Like, I really miss him.
Never gonna leave you.
Never. I love you, Bob.
Thank you much. Very much enjoyed what you shared, but I know you got more to say.
Oh yeah,
What's in your heart?
Bob was my dear friend, and every night we spoke between 11 and 1. And when my phone rings now at 11 o'clock, I still believe, and there's that moment where I think it's Bob, and it'll never stop happening. Bob, I miss you, but you contributed so much to who I am, and I love you.
And you can still talk to him.
I do.
Good. It's beautiful.